It all started on a regular Thursday evening. I was working the night shift at Costco, an absolute dump of a place after hours, dim lights, quiet hum of the refrigeration units, and that unsettling emptiness when the usual customers have gone home. It was just me, my coworker Greg, and the shadows of the warehouse. Greg had been there for years. He was the kind of guy who liked to stay out of the way and keep to himself. He always seemed off, though nervous, always looking over his shoulder like someone was watching him. I never thought much of it until that night. It was around 9:30 when the first strange thing happened. I was scanning through stock in the electronics section when I heard a faint sound, almost like whispering. I figured it was just the ventilation, but then it came again. A soft murmur, like words, just loud enough to hear if you were listening closely. At first, I brushed it off, assuming it was Greg, but he was nowhere near the aisles. I walked to the back to check on him. "Hey Greg, you hear that?" I asked, trying to shake off the chills creeping up my spine. He looked up from his work, his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. "Don't go near the back aisle, man," he muttered under his breath, his voice strained. I laughed it off. "It's just the air conditioning, Greg. Relax." But his eyes were wide, fixed on something behind me. I turned around, expecting to see someone wandering the aisles, maybe a night shopper, though that was a rare sight in Costco past closing hours, but there was nothing. Just the aisles stretching out into the shadows. The whispers came again. Louder this time, but still nothing. I was starting to feel uneasy, but I didn't want to appear paranoid. "All right, let's finish up and head out," I said, more to reassure myself than him. But Greg didn't respond. He was staring down the aisle, his eyes unfocused, lost in whatever was there. I walked to him, trying to get him to snap out of it. But before I could get a word out, the air turned cold, like someone had opened a freezer door right next to me. I shivered, looking around. That was when I saw it. A shadow moving slowly down the aisle, just out of reach of the lights. At first, I thought it was another employee, but the way it moved, there was something off about it. Greg's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. "It's coming for you, you know." I froze. "What are you talking about?" I asked, but Greg wasn't looking at me anymore. His face was pale, his mouth slightly open, as if he were about to say something, but he didn't. The shadow grew darker, stretching unnaturally long as it crawled through the aisles. And then it stopped, right in front of the warehouse door. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I grabbed Greg's arm, yanking him towards the exit. "We need to go. Now." But when I turned back, the shadow had vanished, leaving only an eerie silence behind. As we rushed to leave, I glanced back once more at the darkened aisle. Something was moving there, but there was nothing to see. The next day, Greg was gone, never showed up for his shift again. No one knew where he went, and no one cared to ask. I still wonder if it was Greg's paranoia or if we had both seen something that night. Something that shouldn't be in Costco. But I had no choice but to keep going back. After all, that's what we all do in the end. It's been a week since Greg disappeared, and I'm still working the night shift at Costco. My coworkers all talk about it, but they just assume he either got a better job or decided to quit without saying goodbye. It's easier for them to pretend that nothing happened. But every night, when I step into those cold, fluorescent-lit aisles, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I've been keeping my head down, trying to focus on my work, but I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching me. And then something else started happening. I was putting away some stock in the frozen foods section when I saw her. At first, I thought it was just a late-night shopper, odd but not entirely impossible. People would sometimes sneak in to grab a quick item when the store was about to close. But this woman, she was different. She was tall, wearing a long black coat that looked out of place for the warm weather. Her face was hidden under the hood, her movements slow, deliberate. It wasn't until I heard her whispering softly like someone talking just out of earshot that I realized something was wrong. I froze. It wasn't normal. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but I could feel it deep in my bones. She wasn't talking to herself. She was talking to something or someone else. I tried to brush it off, thinking I was just tired, but the whispering grew louder, filling the empty aisles. "Can I help you with something?" I called out, trying to sound confident, though my voice cracked a little. She turned slowly, and for a second I thought I saw her eyes, dark, black eyes, like voids that swallowed everything around them. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly looked down, not wanting to stare, but something inside me told me I shouldn't have asked her anything. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, staring at me, silent and unmoving. The air around us grew colder, like the temperature in the frozen foods aisle had dropped by 10 degrees. The cold crept up my spine, making it hard to breathe. I took a cautious step forward, still trying to maintain control. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling now. She didn't respond. Instead, she took a step closer, her gaze still locked on me. Then, without warning, she reached out. Her hand was ice cold when it touched my arm, sending a jolt through my entire body. I gasped and yanked away, my heart pounding in my chest. She didn't flinch. She didn't even seem surprised. I backed away slowly, but my feet wouldn't move fast enough. It felt like the whole aisle was stretching, growing longer and longer, like I was walking through a tunnel I couldn't escape from. The walls seemed to close in, and I had the overwhelming sensation that something was behind me. "Leave now," she whispered, so softly I could barely hear it. But the words were chilling, like they had been spoken directly into my mind. I turned and bolted, running down the aisle towards the exit. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would explode in my chest. I didn't dare look back. The whispers seemed to follow me, growing louder and louder, like they were closing in on me from every direction. When I finally reached the doors, I rushed outside, gasping for air. The night was cool, but the relief I felt in the fresh air was short-lived. I glanced back at the building, the Costco's parking lot now empty and lifeless. But then I saw it, the woman standing by the automatic doors, her eyes still fixed on me from the shadows. And then, just like that, she vanished. I haven't been able to get a good night's sleep since then. And every night, I find myself standing at the entrance to Costco, staring at the door, wondering if she'll be there again, waiting for me. But I have to go back. I can't stop. I have to, because something inside me tells me that if I don't return, if I don't finish what I started, I'll never escape the whispers. The following week, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Every time I walked into Costco, the air felt thicker, as if something was waiting for me. No matter how much I tried to rationalize things, tiredness, stress, paranoia, there was a gnawing feeling deep in my gut that something was terribly wrong. But I had no choice. I needed the paycheck. So back to the night shift I went. It was a slow night, just the usual routine. Stocking shelves, checking the inventory. I tried to stay focused, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the woman in the aisle, the black-eyed stranger with her chilling whispers. Had she been a hallucination? A product of my mind playing tricks on me after too many hours in a dark, empty store? Or had it all been real? I didn't know, but the unease wouldn't leave me. At around 1:30 a.m., I took my break and headed to the employee locker room. The fluorescent lights flickered as I walked in, casting an eerie glow over the empty benches and rows of lockers. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the overhead lights. I sat down on the bench, staring at my reflection in the small mirror. My face looked haggard, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. I had to admit I was starting to look like one of those people who had been through something, and not in a good way. I was trying to collect myself when I heard it again. The whispers. This time it wasn't distant. It was right behind me. I spun around, heart racing. There was no one there. The room was empty, just me and the lockers. "Okay, calm down," I muttered under my breath, standing up and walking toward the door. But as I reached for the handle, I saw it. A dark figure in the corner of the room, standing perfectly still, just out of my line of sight. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't tell if it was human or something else entirely. All I knew was that it wasn't supposed to be there. The figure didn't move, it just stood watching me. "Who's there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. I stepped closer, my pulse quickening. The shadows seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive, as though the entire room was closing in on me. And then, just like before, the whispers grew louder. "Leave," I froze. The voice was familiar, like the woman's voice from the aisle, but it was much deeper now, almost guttural. I turned to run, but the door wouldn't budge. My hands fumbled with the handle in panic, but it was as if the door was locked from the outside. "Let me out," I yelled, slamming my shoulder into the door. Nothing. And then, the figure stepped into the dim light. It was a man. His face was hollow, his skin pale, and his eyes were black, just like hers. I staggered back, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would drown out everything else. This thing, this person, reached for me, his fingers twisted and unnatural, stretching out with a speed that made my stomach drop. I screamed, throwing my weight against the door again, desperate for any escape. Finally, with a loud click, the door swung open. I didn't look back as I bolted out of the locker room, running down the corridor, my breath ragged, chest burning. I didn't stop until I was outside, standing in the cool night air, my heart still racing in my chest. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was it a ghost? A hallucination? Or had I lost my mind? I didn't know. But as I looked back at the Costco entrance, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The lights inside the building were flickering, but this time, there was something moving within the store. Shapes moving in the darkness. Shadows, and I knew without a doubt that they were watching me. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I was never going to be alone again. I couldn't sleep after that night. I kept replaying the images in my head. The shadowy figure, the whispers, the cold, empty locker room. It felt like something was closing in on me, slowly and deliberately, like a predator circling its prey. And no matter how hard I tried to escape, it was always there, lurking just beyond my sight. I started coming to work earlier, hoping I could leave before the night shift fully kicked in. But there was no escaping it. The air in Costco felt heavier, more suffocating each time I entered. The same cold dread that had gripped me in the locker room lingered in the aisles, filling every corner of the store. It was as if the building itself was alive. And then things got worse. It was another night, quiet as usual, and I was assigned to help restock the back aisles near the warehouse. I had grown used to the eerie quiet, the long stretches of empty shelves. But that night, something felt different. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, as if the store had stopped breathing. I was pushing a cart down one of the long aisles when I saw it, the end of the aisle, a dead-end spot where the lights flickered. I knew the layout of Costco inside and out, but this was different. There shouldn't have been a dead-end aisle here. My heart skipped a beat. I walked closer, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being drawn to something. The lights flickered again, and I stopped in my tracks. The silence was almost unbearable now, and my mind was racing. I had to leave. I had to get out of here. But my feet wouldn't move. I heard it again, the whispering. Only this time it was louder. It was right behind me, creeping into my mind like a slow poison. Turn around. I wanted to scream, to run, to escape, but my body refused to obey. It was as if the aisle had trapped me, held me in place. And then I turned. At the end of the aisle, standing in the shadows, was the woman. The same woman from before, the one with the black eyes, the one who had whispered to me. Only now she wasn't standing still. She was moving slowly toward me. Her hands were stretched out, long and unnaturally thin, her fingers twisted like broken branches. Her face was covered by the hood of her coat, but I could still feel her eyes on me. She wasn't walking. She was gliding, hovering just above the ground. Every movement seemed deliberate, measured. I tried to back away, but the cart I had been pushing suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I couldn't move it, couldn't make it budge. The air around me was cold, freezing, and I could feel my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it might explode. Then, as if reading my thoughts, the woman whispered again, this time in a voice that sent ice through my veins, "You can't escape." I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The aisle stretched on forever, and the woman, if she even was a woman, was getting closer, closer still. And that's when I heard the others. There were more whispers now, low and guttural, coming from every direction. The shadows in the aisles started to move as if the darkness itself were alive. Figures emerged from the corners, their outlines blurry, indistinct, but their eyes, those black, hollow eyes, were unmistakable. They were everywhere, surrounding me. I could feel them closing in, their presence suffocating me, pressing against my chest. My breath was coming faster now, panic rising in my throat. I had to get out. I had to escape. But no matter how hard I tried to move, I couldn't. The aisle seemed to stretch further and further into the darkness, trapping me. The whispers grew louder, and I could hear them clearly now, more voices, more of them, all saying the same thing. Leave this place. I was shaking, my legs weak, my heart racing. But somehow I gathered enough strength to turn and run. I ran down the aisle, past the shelves, past the empty rows of stock. My mind was racing. Where was the exit? Where was the door? I had to find it, had to escape before they caught me. But when I reached the end of the aisle, the door wasn't there. There was no exit. I spun around, frantic, looking for any way out. The figures in the shadows were closing in, their black eyes fixated on me. The whispers grew louder and louder until it felt like they were inside my head, suffocating me. And then, through the chaos, I heard a voice. A familiar voice. It was Greg. Get out, now. I didn't think. I didn't care. I ran. I bolted down the aisles, towards the front of the store, my legs burning, my chest tight with fear. The darkness was chasing me, pulling at me, but I didn't stop. I don't know how I made it out. I don't know how I found the door, how I managed to push it open, but I did. And as I stepped outside into the cool night air, I looked back. Costco stood silent, its lights flickering, but there was no sign of the figures, no sign of the woman. I'm not sure if I'm safe. I don't know what I saw in there or what's following me. But one thing is certain, I can never go back. Not ever. Because whatever it is that's waiting inside Costco, it's still there. And it's coming for anyone who dares to step inside. I hope this story is enough to warn others. Because I don't think I'm the only one who's seen it. I thought I was done with Costco. I told myself I'd never step foot in there again. I tried to forget about it, about the whispers, about the dark figures with eyes that swallowed light. But the nightmares didn't stop. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel that coldness, that unnatural chill pressing down on me. I could hear her voice, soft but unmistakable, whispering, calling. Come back. I fought it. I tried to stay away, tried to pretend I wasn't still haunted by what happened. But the pull, the dread, it was always there. It wasn't long before I started having strange urges, nightmares that felt real, visions of the aisles stretching forever, dark shapes moving in the corners, those black eyes watching from every shadow. And then, one night, I had a dream. No, it wasn't a dream. It felt more like a warning. I was back inside Costco, walking down one of the aisles I knew too well. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, casting strange, shifting shadows. The air was thick and every step echoed too loudly in the silence. But I wasn't alone. She was there again. The woman in the long black coat, her face hidden by the hood. This time she didn't speak. She just pointed at the far end of the aisle, her bony fingers trembling. I wanted to run. I wanted to wake up. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, rooted to the spot. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The dream, it wasn't just a dream. It was a message. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I had to go back. Something was pulling me in, something that wouldn't let me go. The next night, I drove back to Costco. I don't know why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear. But I couldn't ignore it. I had to face whatever had been haunting me. When I got there, it was just as I remembered, quiet, dark, lifeless. The parking lot was empty, the store eerily still. The air felt cold, like the building was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I walked in, the automatic doors sliding open with a soft whoosh. The lights buzzed overhead, the quiet hum of the refrigerators in the background. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. I walked through the aisles, every step heavy with dread. I was looking for something, but I didn't know what. I kept walking, moving deeper into the store, past the aisles, toward the back, where it all started. And then I saw it. At the far end of the aisle, where the lights flickered, was the dead end I had seen before. The one that shouldn't have existed. The shadows were darker here, thicker, almost alive. I knew what I had to do. I stepped into the aisle. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath shallow. I could hear the whispers again, just like the first time. Faint at first, but growing louder. They were calling me, and then, just like in the dream, I saw her. The woman standing at the far end of the aisle. Her face still hidden, but her eyes were glowing black, endless pits that seemed to suck in the light around her. She didn't move. She just stood there, watching me. I took a step forward, and then another. The air grew colder with each movement. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to see what was at the end of the aisle. I had to know. When I reached the end, the shadows shifted and I could see something in the darkness. There, just beyond the flickering light, was a door. A door I had never seen before. It was made of old, weathered wood and it looked out of place in Costco, like it didn't belong. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. Go through, I reached out and grabbed the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a stairwell leading down into darkness. My heart raced. I knew this wasn't normal. This wasn't a part of the store I had ever seen. But I couldn't turn back now. I stepped inside. The stairs were narrow, the air thick with dust. The further I went, the colder it got. It felt like I was descending into the very bowels of the building. The walls around me seemed to pulse, breathing in rhythm with my own heartbeat. At the bottom, I found another door. It was heavier, more foreboding. But there was something calling me from beyond it. Something I couldn't resist. I pushed open the door. What I saw made my blood run cold. The room was large, cavernous, and lined with old shelves, but they weren't filled with products. No, these shelves were stacked with bodies. Bodies of people who looked like they had been frozen in time, their faces twisted in terror. Their eyes were open, wide, unblinking, and they stared at me, pleading for help, begging to be freed from whatever nightmare they were trapped in. And in the center of the room, standing in a pool of cold, black water, was a figure. Greg. But he wasn't. Greg. Not anymore. His skin was pale, his eyes hollow, and his mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. He didn't move, just stood there, staring at me with those black, empty eyes. Help us? His voice rasped, but it wasn't his voice. It was something else, something ancient, something evil. I took a step back, but the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. The whispers returned, louder than ever, filling my head with madness. Join us? I turned to face the darkness, knowing that there was no escape, and that was when I understood. Costco wasn't just a store. It was a prison. Prison for lost souls. And I had just joined them. I'm writing this now because I know I won't be able to leave. No one will. If you're reading this, stay away from Costco. Don't go. It's not just a store. It's a trap. I thought the worst was over. I thought I had escaped. I thought that by walking away from Costco, by leaving that dark, haunted building behind, I could put it all behind me. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. The darkness that I had walked into that night didn't leave me. It followed me home. It slipped under my skin and wrapped itself around my mind, gnawing at me in ways I couldn't explain. At night, I would hear the whispers, soft and insistent, calling me back. At work, I'd glance at the clock and feel the hours slipping away as if Costco was pulling me back. I started to see things that weren't there. In the reflection of mirrors, in the corner of my vision, I would see shadows moving, figures standing just out of reach. My mind would race, and every time I'd look, they'd vanish like ghosts in the corner of my world. But I knew they were real. I knew that whatever had followed me had found a way to slip into my life. It wasn't long before I received a strange call, just a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway, desperate for anything that might break the silence that had been suffocating me. The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. You should have stayed away, it said. I didn't need to ask who it was. I knew. It was her. The woman. The one who had haunted my every step since that night in the store. But now her voice was different. It wasn't the soft whisper it had been. It was deep, distorted, like 1,000 voices layered on top of each other. I tried to warn you, she continued, her words slithering through the phone line like a snake. You can't escape. We're all in here now. I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking, my pulse racing. I felt trapped, like a spider caught in its own web. I thought that by leaving Costco, I could break free, but there was no escaping the dark thing I had walked into. It wasn't just the building. It was something more, something alive, something older than the store itself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, the weight of my fears pressing down on me. I felt like I was being watched, like something was waiting for me just out of sight. But no matter how many times I checked, there was nothing there. Around 3 a.m., I decided to take a walk. Maybe the fresh air would help clear my mind, shake off the creeping dread that had been following me. As I walked down the empty street, I couldn't help but glance at the familiar sight in the distance, the Costco. I don't know why I did it, but my eyes locked onto the glowing lights in the distance. The parking lot was dark, but I could see the faint outline of the building as if it were calling me back. I should have kept walking. I should have ignored it. But something inside me, something compelled me to turn around and head back toward the store. I don't know what happened next. One moment I was standing in front of Costco, staring at the massive doors, and the next I was inside. The air was thick with the same cold, stagnant feeling it always had. The lights flickered overhead, the aisles stretching endlessly in front of me. There was no one else in sight, just me and the cold silence that wrapped itself around every corner of the store. I started walking down the aisles, every step echoing too loudly in the emptiness. The store felt wrong now. It was like it had shifted somehow, like the walls themselves were growing closer. That's when I saw it, the aisle that shouldn't have been there. The one I had seen in my nightmares. The one that led to the door. The one where everything had started. I didn't want to go down that aisle. I knew what waited for me there. But I had no choice. I was being pulled. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, until they were deafening. Come, 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 the aisle stretched on forever, the lights flickering as I walked deeper into its oppressive darkness. My heart raced, each step heavier than the last. And then I saw her. The woman in the long black coat. She was standing at the end of the aisle, her face still hidden, her eyes black as pitch. Her hands reached out toward me, long and skeletal. She didn't move, just stood there, waiting. Join us, she whispered. And the shadows behind her seemed to move, undulating like living things. They reached out, wrapping themselves around her, and for a moment, I thought I saw Greg. His eyes wide, his face twisted in that grotesque smile. Greg, I whispered, my voice trembling. But there was no response. Only the sound of the shadows creeping closer, the whispers rising to a crescendo. I turned to run, but the aisle had changed. The shelves were no longer stocked with merchandise. Instead, they were filled with bodies. People I recognized. People from the real world, people I knew. They were frozen, their faces pale, their eyes wide and unblinking, trapped in the same nightmarish prison. The aisles were closing in on me. The darkness was alive, shifting, pushing toward me. I could feel the weight of it, like the store was trying to swallow me whole. I had no choice but to run. I ran down the aisle, down every corridor, until my lungs burned, until I could no longer feel my legs. I ran until I reached the front of the store, the automatic doors sliding open, letting me out into the night air. I didn't stop running, but as I glanced over my shoulder, I could see the store standing there in the distance, the lights flickering in rhythm with my racing heart. I don't know if I made it out. I don't know if this is real. But one thing is certain, Costco isn't just a store. It's a place where the darkness is waiting. And if you hear the whispers, if you feel the pull, you'll know you're already too late. There's no escape. Not for me. Not for anyone. It's been weeks since I ran out of Costco. Weeks since I thought I'd escaped whatever nightmare that store had become. But the truth is, it never left me. It's always with me now. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. Every time I blink, I hear the whispers. They're getting louder. The pull is growing stronger. And I know that it's only a matter of time before I'm drawn back in. I tried to move on. I changed my phone number, I moved to a different part of the city, but nothing worked. The nightmares still haunt me. The feeling of those eyes watching me from the darkness never goes away. The worst part? I see them everywhere now. The shadows. The figures. They're in the corners of every room, in the reflections of windows, in the crowds of people. And sometimes when I walk into a store, I think I see the entrance to Costco standing there at the end of the aisle. But it's never Costco. It's just a trick of the light. And then it happened again. I was at work trying to get through the day when I heard it. The faintest whisper just out of earshot. But I knew it. I knew it. Come back, we're waiting. I froze. My stomach twisted into a knot, my blood running cold. I looked around, but no one seemed to notice. No one else heard it. I thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe finally my mind was giving out. But the whisper came again. Louder. More urgent. Come back to us. My heart pounded in my chest. I tried to ignore it, tried to shake off the dread that was quickly swallowing me. But I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. Costco was calling me back. The darkness was pulling me toward it. I grabbed my coat and ran, not even caring where I was going. The streets felt empty, the world felt empty, but I knew where I had to go. I knew what I had to face. I arrived at the store before I even realized I was there. The familiar sight of Costco loomed ahead, its towering structure like a dark giant. The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The air was thick with that same unnatural cold, like the place was holding its breath, waiting for me. I stepped inside. The automatic doors slid open, and I was met with silence. A silence so deep, it felt like the world had stopped. The aisles stretched out before me, but there was no one in sight. No staff, no customers. Just the cold, dimly lit aisles, waiting. And then, from the shadows, I heard her voice. Welcome back. I turned, and there she was, the woman in the black coat. She was standing at the end of the aisle, her face still hidden under the hood, but her eyes, they were staring at me, those black voids that swallowed everything in their path. "You knew you'd come back," she said, her voice a hiss like the wind through dry leaves. "You always come back." I didn't answer. I couldn't even speak. She stepped forward, her long, twisted fingers reaching for me. The shadows followed her, slithering like living things, closing in from all directions. "Why are you doing this?" I finally managed to whisper. Her laugh was soft, chilling. "Because you're one of us now." And that's when I understood. The store wasn't just a building. It was a portal. A door. A place where the lost souls were trapped. Their lives drained away. Their bodies turned into empty shells. Nothing more than shadows in the dark. I had seen it all. Greg. The bodies. The endless aisles. All of it was part of the same curse. A cycle of souls that could never escape. "Join us," she whispered, her voice sweet and malicious all at once. I backed away, but the aisles stretched on forever, the walls closing in, trapping me in this nightmare. There was no escape, no way out. I turned and ran, pushing past the shelves, my chest tight with fear, my heart pounding louder than ever. I ran until my legs gave out, until my body was screaming for rest. But the store wouldn't let me go. Every corner I turned, every aisle I tried to escape down, I saw the same thing. The shadows, the figures, they were everywhere. They were coming for me. The whispers were all around me, louder now, growing frantic, until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Was this the real Costco? Or was I trapped in some twisted version of it? I didn't know, but I knew one thing for sure. I was never leaving. Not now. Not ever. Because Costco isn't just a store. It's a prison. And I'm one of the lost souls trapped inside.